Alright team, welcome to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to have your company with me once again from wherever you might be listening to the show from around the world. It is very cool to see all these different locations popping up on the listener map, so thank you very much for tuning in. Now today we're going to be discussing the situation where employees choose to bypass the chain of command. And what I mean by that is a situation where an employee has a complaint or a gripe, and instead of taking it up with their immediate supervisor, they choose to go to the next line of management. Now there are many reasons why this can end up occurring, and so as leaders looking to deal with something like this, we have to be very careful to understand that there is nuance. This person actually might be quite justified in taking that action, or they might be quite unjustified and looking to do it for nefarious purposes. So we have to be very aware of what's going on and why. Now usually I'd kick off the show with an example of a real world situation from elsewhere, either through history or in corporate land, which would help us set the scene and add some context. But I actually have a personal anecdote to share with you all on this topic. So this is going to come from my personal archive of experiences. So I haven't always chosen to speak with my direct line supervisor first when it comes to having a concern and making a complaint. And the one time that I did choose not to do that was actually one that occurred, a decision that occurred out of fear. And it was a fear that my supervisor at the time wanted me gone, out of the job. I didn't feel safe opening up to him. I didn't trust him. And to give you some context, this was because he came into the role and treated me and my leadership peers with disdain. He began making changes that directly impacted our teams and changing processes that we had to follow to perform our jobs correctly, without any form of consultation or discussion with us as a leadership group at all. He seemed to operate from a position of I know best and this is what's happening, and nobody else's opinion is worth incorporating into that decision. It was almost as if he was getting information from some other third party that we weren't aware of. And we were very concerned that this was meaning that he was going to make changes and decisions that not only didn't make sense, but would in fact undermine our ability to do our jobs. And so we all were suspicious. We didn't trust him. Also, at the time, he decided that he was going to re-advertise the role that I was filling. I was a supervisor at the time who had been in the role for 2 years by the time he came on board. I had never interviewed for the job. I essentially just signed a new contract and was placed into the role. And he came in, and without speaking to me at all or giving me reasons as to why it was occurring, he decided to re-advertise my job, both internally and externally, and wanted me to interview for it. Now that didn't fill me with confidence, and I was none the wiser as to why he was taking this approach, as I hadn't had any performance concerns raised with me by him or anybody else at the time. So he was operating in a very strange manner which completely lacked communication and left me very uncertain as to what his intentions were. So this was occurring, as I said, across the leadership group. It wasn't just me. And so we felt we couldn't speak with him, as it seemed to us that he was implementing change with little regard for our thoughts or what it meant for us and our team. So I chose, after a few months of this, to go above his head to someone that I did trust, and it was in fact the leader he reported to. And I voiced my concerns with her, and through her involvement, we were actually able to organise a sit down between he and I, and we ended up speaking fairly frankly with one another and at least coming to an understanding. Not an understanding that filled me with confidence or made me think that he was, in my corner all of a sudden, but at least we were actually able to have a chat. Now, many, many years on, looking back at that, I am of the view that I probably could have handled it better. In hindsight, I think I probably should have caught up with him directly for a coffee or something like that and just had an honest talk with him. But the reason that I didn't do it was because I was intimidated and of the view that he wanted me out of the organisation, and I wasn't really sure as to why. And so hindsight's always 20/20, isn't it? It's always easier to look back and go, well, I should have done that. But when you're in the position where you are literally fearing for your job and someone seems to have already made up their mind about you and you have no idea why, it's easier said than done to make that call to approach a senior leader and have a direct conversation with them like that. And that's why I like to underscore the importance of not scolding an employee for skipping their immediate supervisor with a concern without trying to understand it from their perspective. Is it possible that their reasons for skipping their direct supervisor and coming to you are actually quite valid? Is it understandable? So try and understand the why before jumping to conclusions. Is it possible that their direct supervisor has given them cause for concern and hasn't made it feel like a safe space where they can be approached and have concerns voiced? Make sure that that supervisor is operating with integrity before scolding the employee for skipping them and coming to you. Now, the nuance on this topic is that sometimes none of that applies and the leader is actually a really good communicator and they treat people with respect. And yet still the employee chooses to go around them to cause trouble. There can be a little bit of white-anting going on sometimes where for whatever reason there's just a weird personality dynamic and this employee just doesn't like this supervisor. It happens. I've seen it numerous times. And in that situation, as the senior leader who is ending up in the room with this person who has skipped the supervisor and is now making complaints with you, you find yourself in a tricky situation, and here's how I recommend you go about dealing with it. Firstly, make sure you take on board the concerns and treat them seriously. And do the homework, use the critical thinking piece, and make sure that the supervisor is behaving correctly. Interrogate the issue properly. Don't assume. And if after doing that, which means talking to the employee, talking to other employees, i.e., do you guys feel like you can raise issues with this person? Do you guys view this as unfair? What is being said to you? After speaking with the employees and the one making the complaint, speak with the supervisor directly. How do you communicate? How has that been received? What's your technique? How are you communicating? Once you've cleared all that up and you've arrived at the conclusion that, okay, look, this supervisor seems to be operating with integrity, and I know that from my experience with this person, they certainly seem to be kind and measured and a good quality manager, well, then you're in a position where you have to consider the possibility that this employee who is skipping their direct supervisor might be doing so with nefarious intentions in mind. And this kicks off a broader engagement piece. Once you've established all that, you need to present a united front. You've got someone who's looking to white ant their immediate supervisor and undermine their leadership, so you need to make sure that it's made clear that we don't have a situation where someone gets a no from mum and then runs to dad for a different answer. Leadership is united across the board in the organisation and on the same page. That is what we want to see. So what I would recommend you do in that situation, once you've arrived at that conclusion that the employee is out of line, is present that united front. Get in a room with the immediate supervisor and the troublesome employee and have the conversation about those concerns. And I'd recommend that as the senior manager, you don't lead the conversation. Instead, I recommend that you let the immediate supervisor do it because you don't want to undermine their authority, but just be present in the room to show that you support them. But let them drive it. And once that's been made clear and everybody is on the same page and it's obvious to this person that there's now no point in going around the immediate supervisor to you, it might be useful to monitor their behaviour from there and keep an open mind. If this example of white anting has taken place, is it possible that the person is causing trouble in other areas? Are they engaging in other behaviours that are not particularly conducive to good culture? Usually where there's smoke, there's fire. Are they a good employee? Are they good at their job? Are they being negative with other people? Are they spreading rumours? Are they operating according to the code of conduct? So worth keeping your finger on the pulse in that regard once you've got the indication that someone has been operating with nefarious intent and looking to undermine one of your leaders. And if you suspect after all of that analysis that actually this person does appear to be operating in a way which is not great from a culture perspective and actually against our code of conduct, you need to take swift and decisive action. But you need to coach the immediate supervisor in doing this. So again, communication is everything. Have a chat with them. Say, look, we've got together, we've had a chat, we've found out over a period of months that this person is not really operating to the code of conduct as per our expectations. And then facilitate a performance management situation. Because this stuff has to be stamped out quickly. If you let it fester, it only gets worse and erodes the culture and just makes it a hellish working environment for everybody. And again, coach your supervisor who's dealing with this team member and give them the support they need. Let them lead it, let them run it, but make sure that you present a united front by being in the room and showing your full support for all of these actions that are being undertaken. And what that means, and your supervisor might be across it already, but if they're not, you need to be prepared to ensure that everybody, including the troublesome employee, understands the code of conduct and understands where their behaviour sits in relation to that code of conduct, so that if you do happen to have a performance management process kicked off, no one is wondering what it's for. So it's different everywhere, but it might look like the following. It's been determined that the behaviour, the poor behaviour, extends beyond this white anting and undermining of the immediate supervisor, and after a period of weeks or months of analysis and observation, it looks like this person's just a bad fit. And where there's smoke, yes, turns out there was fire, and they're just negative and causing cultural issues. And a performance management plan is required. So make sure you get on the same page with your supervisor, understand the code of conduct, understand all the steps that are to be taken, and then your first step is to schedule, in full collaboration with your HR team, a meeting whereby the employee is going to be told that they're operating in a way that contravenes and violates the code of conduct. And what you need to do is bring that part of the document up on screen so that you can all refer to the behaviour in an unambiguous fashion. Let them know that, hey, according to this section, you're out of line and the behaviour needs to stop. Issue them a verbal warning. That is intended to act as a shot across the bow, so to speak. And make it very clear what the expectations are going forward. And all of this, by the way, should be being driven by the person's immediate supervisor. You are in the room as a show of support and solidarity. A facilitator, so to speak. And then make it very clear what happens if the behaviour does not stop. It's different everywhere, as I mentioned, but perhaps it might be after this verbal warning. If the behaviour doesn't stop, it's a first written warning. After that, a second written warning, then a third written warning, and then dismissal for minor misconduct that we can demonstrate is a pattern of behaviour. Serious misconduct is a different thing, like stealing and assault, that's instant dismissal. But this minor misconduct is often a little more insidious and difficult to deal with. But that's how I want you to go about it, in full accordance and collaboration with your HR team. And if the person does improve through coaching, and after having it made clear to them, they realise, okay, I'm out of line here. I need to pull my socks up and get with it. That is the ideal outcome. So I don't want you to be thinking you're going to gun for this person and get them out as a first port of call. I want your motivation to be rectifying the behaviour, getting the best out of this person through some great leadership coaching, and then moving on happily ever after from there. The exit from the business for this person is sometimes a necessary outcome, but not necessarily the best one. So, it's far more satisfying to get somebody up to the standard that they need to be at through good coaching and good leadership. So make sure that is your number one goal. But what this process does is it makes it very clear that as a leadership team you are aligned. White-anting and undermining of supervisors is not going to be tolerated, and it's certainly not going to work because, hey, who would have thought you talk to each other as leaders? And it also sends a very clear signal that there are consequences for poor behaviour that erodes leadership and company culture. And presenting a united front like that will instill confidence in your supervisor that they can operate effectively, and that if people choose to go around them, it's not going to be rewarded or successful. And that is crucially important. So we'll leave it there, guys, but I just wanted to show you two sides of that coin. It's a nuanced topic, and you have to be operating from a place of critical thinking always, because no two situations are the same. But as long as we're considering very carefully the reasons why this person might be going over their supervisor's head, and then taking action from there in a logical, evidence-driven manner, it leaves us in good stead to operate well and to make the best decision possible. So I hope that makes sense. I'm sure you've encountered situations like that before in your own career. Maybe you've even done as I had done, and you've actually been the person who has gone above your immediate supervisor. But let's be very careful to operate from a place of both compassion but also critical thinking when it comes to dealing with those situations. We'll leave it there. Guys, thank you so much for joining me once again. As I always do, make sure you jump on the socials and follow the show. Instagram, all those links are in the show notes. Please jump on and follow for reels and more content. And of course, subscribe to the show, guys, if you're getting value, and maybe even share it with a few friends to spread the word so that others can enjoy the value as well. But until next time, stay safe and we'll speak soon.